This is the feature overview of the RDI Calculator. This program differs from all other food loggers in that it will help you decide the portion sizes required to meet your RDI, recommended daily intake of nutrients. So let's begin. The profile data is all the information required by the calculator to be able to perform the task of deciding which food quantities you need in order to meet your RDI. So first you need to decide what food guide you're going to be going by. The Canadian food guide was something I got from Canada's .org website. It's mostly for demonstration. This only serves to show that you can have multiple guides. The one we'll be using is the USDA MyPlate food guide, which I got from choosemyplate.gov. Picking this selection defines the food groups that most food items will fall into. In this case, the main food groups are fruits, vegetables, grains, protein foods, dairy, oil. All of this information was taken from the choosemyplate.gov, but it was made easier because the USDA Standard Resource Database, SR26, which you also see on the screen, has its own food groups. Unfortunately, the USDA food group milk and eggs, which I'll show you later, had to go because that had to be split into dairy and protein foods. Despite how cumbersome the USDA Standard Resource Database food groups might be, it's way better than the nutrient database that will be replacing it, which the USDA calls the USDA Branded Food Products Database. It doesn't even have any food groups, so I'll have to be creating that myself. The reason this is a big deal is because many diets allow for multiple servings of certain food groups. This allows for a literally better balanced meal. Without food group data, there is no way to prevent the application from assigning just a few foods in large quantities to your diet. This is how come most applications are food loggers and they don't even attempt what I'm about to show you here. So we're going to go MyPlate. Here we pick our demographic information. So for me, that would be male 31 to 50. And then my serving sizes is very similar. The male 31 to 50, which I just chose, defines the USDA recommended daily intake of nutrients based on gender and age. I had to make these files based on the information from the document Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2010, Appendix 5. This selection I'm about to make defines the serving measures and quantities for each food group. The USDA Standard Resource Database had potential serving measures for any given food item, but not all items have a suggested serving size. In their list of measures, I had to make these serving sizes files, and they're used to search a food's measure in order to find a match and identify a default if no match is found. The USDA Branded Food Product Database, which is the one that will be replacing this one, has only one serving measure and quantity for any given food in their list. So serving sizes were done for me. The information in these files are used to create data on the foods that will be selected. The data will be used to try and make sure that the reasonable amounts of foods are used to reach a person's recommended daily intake. So here's that database that I was telling you about, which right now is just the old one. Later I'll add both and you'll be able to pick between the two. So let's go ahead and continue from here. The next thing I have to do is select my nutrients of interest. These aren't necessarily nutrients that I'm interested in meeting 100%. For example, salt, if I were to have it on the list, isn't something I definitely want 100% of. Now, this list is like 60-odd selections, so you can pick a lot. Since this is only demonstration, though, I'm only going to pick a few. Protein and carbs seem good. Everybody cares about. calories. These next ones, these are just for show. Those are sugars, different kinds of sugars, and then water. So I'm going to go ahead and accept. Now, of course, I don't want 100% of everything in that list. So I'm going to pick the nutrients that are just to be looked at. For example, those 3 sugars that I had. I don't want to reach 100%, and which is fine because they don't even have a recommended intake, as I'll show you right now. So for energy, if my calorie intake is 2,000 calories, I don't necessarily want to meet it if I'm on a diet. I want to be less than 2,000, which is how we lose weight. So I just wanted to tell me what the current number is. I'm not interested in meeting 2,000. And I deliberately didn't define it now because I want to show you some that little feature that my program has. So now that I picked the foods that I'm just interested in observing, I can realize that I forgot to set the value for my calories. So I can go back into nutrients of interest and I can edit any of that information at any time. And what it does is it remembers my previous selections. So here I am with energy, and I'm going to set it to 2,000 and hit enter. Okay, at this point I can select foods, and this is where I get to show you the USDA food groups, or I will. So first I have to decide what foods I want to eat, and in the dialog what you'll see is I have several options. Most food loggers only have this first and search. They don't have ors and they don't have nots. So let me show you exactly how this can be used. So if I were to say cereal, oats, and I were to search, given the USDA's current food list, what you'll notice is I get a lot. Let's say, for example, I was not interested in microwavable. So I can close this and put not micro. I could put the whole thing, but I really don't want to. And what you'll notice is in this selection now, I don't have the word microwave. This feature really works well when you're trying to avoid certain ingredients like salt. So you can say without and salt, and then you won't get it. So, but for now, I want, let's say, quick oats, not fortified, and then I want potatoes, so let me put that. Okay. I also want a particular kind of milk. And finally, raw cabbage. So, the other thing that this program can do that no other application I've seen can do is this. You do advanced search now. This allows you to search by food group. Previously, I told you how I had to divide the USDA food group, dairy and eggs, into just dairy, which is this food group minus all the eggs, and then protein, which is all of these USDA food groups, including the eggs. We're not really interested in this, so we're just going to ignore it. And upon ignoring it, you'll notice that it says the advanced search hasn't been changed, so none of the selections we made will influence any of the of our searches. So we're just going to say okay, and we're actually done here. So we're going to go accept changes and exit, which will allow us to finally play with our foods in order to get our RDI. Okay, so when I select this option, it is going to show. Alright, so I'm going to make this screen bigger for us. Right, so now we can see everything. The RDI calculator has two tables. The top table lists the foods previously selected. All information about these foods were determined automatically. So it gathered all the information about the foods we selected, and it determined our servings allowed and what food groups they belong to. In the measure column, this is where it got all the information from the USDA database. There are multiple measures for any given food. I added 3 default measures at the bottom of every single food because some foods only had a single measure. And it wasn't a very convenient measure. Sometimes it's just grams. And so, you might want fluid ounces. So in the eaten column, that tells you how much of the food you have eaten, and as you eat, or as you put that you're going to eat, your totals change, which also affects your percentage down here. What happens here towards the right is that the program can suggest certain foods based on the nutrients that's in highest need. So for example, here it says your protein is the nutrient in highest need because it's the only nutrient that's required. And it says given the serving size of all the foods, the food that it recommends you add is cereal oats here. What you'll notice about the measure amounts is that they can be changed. So for example, here in milk, it's 1 cup. Now, if you want to make that fluid ounces, well, there's 8 ounces to a cup, so that would change your servings allowed from 3 to 24, which I will demonstrate right now. 24. So now, when you eat 1, it'll be 1 fluid ounce, and you'll get a total of 24 before it decides, okay, you've had enough milk, and I'm going to start assigning something else. As all of these as your eaten column equals your servings allowed, it starts to remove foods as being food servings as being potentials that can meet your RDI. So I'm going to go back here to cup. We're going to start to play with our calculator here. With no options here selected, here's one pass, and what it does is with this thing selected, as you begin to add suggested foods, it will go, for example, to 1 cereal, but that's it. It'll get up to 6 servings of potatoes, which for here is half cups, so that needs to be explained. Because potatoes and cabbage are from the same food group, they get the same overall portion size. So potatoes get 6 1/2 cups, which is the same as 3 full cups. So the program calculated that if the serving amount here is in terms of 1/2, then it'll get double the amount that other items in the same food group will get. So anyway, one pass with this selected, if you go calculate RDI, what you'll see is that it will go through each of the foods up to the maximum serving allowed. At that point, it'll stop and it'll say, what do you want me to do? I can't do any more, and you'll have to click add more servings. Let me demonstrate this without any things selected. So we're going to go calculate RDI. And you'll notice that the servings allowed changed. Before it was 1633, now it's 2, 6, 2, 12.66. This is because it had to double up after it reached all of the allotted servings. And you'll notice that the eaten here is 2 servings of oatmeal, 6 servings of potatoes, 3 servings of milk, and 3 servings of cabbage. So if you click one pass, what you'll notice is that you'll go calculate RDI, except that it stopped at 1 serving here, 6 servings here. And in order to go further, you'd have to click add more servings. So now the potential, it has a potential to continue. So you'll go continue, and it finally met its desired nutrients at 114% of protein. So over 100%, but not too far over. So let's try a few more interesting options. So use foods once. Let's reset this. If you do use foods once, now that appears to completely ignore servings allowed, but it doesn't. What it'll do is it'll say, I'm only going to have 1 of any given food. And it will then stop and say that it can't reach the RDI, if in fact it can, because you told it to limit itself to using 1 food. So what'll happen without 1 pass selected, it'll add any given food until everything gets a 1, and then it'll say, I'm going to increase the amount of foods I can eat to be 2 of everything, and then it'll go, and then so on and so forth. So let's just see this in action. So it's going to do oatmeal, and then milk, and then potatoes, and then cabbage. And see, it says all foods have been used at least once. And so you'll go again, add more servings, and it'll go again the same pattern until finally it reaches its goal. And you'll notice that it met its goal at 114%. So we're going to go ahead and reset. We're going to try 1 pass and remove serving from same food group. If we do calculate RDI, this only goes through 1 pass, so you won't see 100%. But you will see that it has 0 on cabbage. The reason is because it had decided that potatoes had more protein than cabbage. So it assigned a full 6 half cups, which is 3 1-cup servings. And because they're of the same food group, it didn't allow cabbage because you already had removed servings from the same food group. You'll notice that when you calculate your RDI using this method, you got a lot closer to 100%. This shows that different methods for reaching your RDI will produce different results. I'm going to change it up just a little. I'm going to do use food once and remove servings from same food group. Now if I take the potatoes and I give it 6, right, that gives us 3 cups cabbage because it's in the same food group. So if I add suggested food twice, which will be oatmeal and then milk, right, it says that it can't meet the nutrients weren't met, and that's because we automatically assigned 6 total cups of vegetables eaten. So when we add more servings, though, we get to start over. Now if we add the suggested food, which would be cereal, milk again, now we have cabbage. The reason is because we're allowed 6 cups on this iteration of cabbage, and we've only used up 3 because of potatoes, and they share the same food group. which is how come we're allowed cabbage. So we're going to go ahead and add that. And cabbage is still the food with the highest protein, so we're going to add it again. And now we need to add more servings. So once you do that, you're done. And this is an interesting outcome because we're at 124% of our protein intake. Again, showing that different options produce different results. Now we're going to play with the edit column feature. So had you decided that the cereal here, 110 grams, is just too much, and that you need to reduce that, then you can in fact do that. And so what I'm going to show is that by clicking the edit amount column, you can now edit this. Now what I'm going to show is that by editing the serving size, you change the total amount of nutrients that you can get from any given serving, which changes the logic of the calculator, because right now it says that oatmeal is the best food to get protein from, given that it's at 110 grams per serving size. If you change that serving size, another food might become more appealing. The other thing I want to show you is that if you reduce this amount by half, you double the servings allowed, because it's by volume. That's the way the calculator is designed to run. So if you make this 55, which is half of what it was before, you'll notice that both the food that it recommends and the servings allowed changes. And sure enough, the servings allowed double, and the food that it now recommends is milk. Now we're going to uncheck edit amount column so that we can play with our food in the calculator. So at this point, we're going to calculate our food. And you'll notice that we're at 102%. Now, this is important because I'm going to show you later that the logic doesn't change despite the fact that you can change the amount of any given food. So we're going to click reset here. Then we're going to edit our amount column again, and we're going to reset to what we were before. Okay. Now, there we go. Okay, so we're going to manually enter the food quantities, but only by the portion that they were. So before, this was a 2, and because we doubled the amount size, we're only going to make that 1. And then everything else below it was as follows: 6, 4, and 3. Okay, and what you'll notice is the percent here is 102, just like you'd expect. So what I'm going to show you now is that you can save all of this. If you play with the calculator multiple times and you decide you want to change save a particular outcome, I'm not really interested in anything, so I'm just going to run the first calculation, and then I'm going to say accept. And so what you're going to see here is that it's going to save the data in a format that I can view later. This is right here. Now, later this feature will go into particular days, like all food loggers show you all the foods you've eaten on particular days. So I'm not quite there yet, but this at least demonstrates the principle. None of this data is selectable because it's read-only. So the other two buttons here have to do with crashes. Java is rather resource intensive, so when it crashes, you might think it's the application that it's broke, and it's well, technically yes it did, but it's because of Java. So this button will be selectable, and the message here will tell you essentially that something's broke. Hopefully you'll never see these buttons selectable. If there was anything in the video that you liked, please add a like. Hopefully you'll find this useful, and I'll leave a link in the description for you to download the application so that you can play with it. Thank you very much for your time.